It's loading. We should be live now.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another iDrama seminar series talk. So it is my pleasure today to introduce you our speaker, Andrea Baronchelli. So Andrea is a reader at the Department of Mathematics of City University London, and he's also a member of the Alan Turing Institute. So his research interests include spreading phenomena on networks, the dynamics of social norms, and collective behavior change and cryptocurrency ecosystems. So today he will talk about how communities shape the blockchain ecosystem beyond original design, and with a focus on collective dynamics of dark web markets and the informal network of developers. So Andrea, please take it right away.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's very nice to meet you. And okay, the meeting is recorded. I will share my screen now, and which hopefully will work. Can you see it? Nice. And now, okay, so I cannot see time anymore. So please interrupt me if I go too long. I hope I will not.
Okay.
And yeah, so I wanted to offer you some recent results on two different aspects which share this idea of the role of communities and how user behavior shapes or influences blockchain ecosystems beyond what the initial design was thinking. And okay, these are the collaborators. It's also a work supported by a grant from ESRC, and it's a strong collaboration with Chainalysis, where we have done a lot of work. The heroes of the story will be Abir El-Bahrawi for the first part, Mathieu Nadini for the second, and then Lorenzo Lucchini for the last. Exactly. The focus is on the social aspect of blockchain and cryptocurrencies as socio-technical systems. And I know outlines are talk killers, but in this case, I wanted just to warn you that I will speak about dark markets and then crypto codes, which is separated. Okay, let's start with the collective dynamics of dark web marketplaces. So, what's a dark web marketplace? I guess here most of you may be familiar somehow, at least with the concept, but in any case, they are online platforms, very much like the platforms we know in the normal web to buy and sell stuff. The difference is that they live in the dark web, so you need to access them through Tor, which is getting more and more user-friendly, and they sell all kinds of goods. Let's say they don't have some of the limitations of normal platforms we are more used to. They also can sell drugs, weapons, etc. And they use Bitcoin. The first one in 2011 was Silk Road. You see this is a screen, and it's really very much the thing we know. So you have the item, you have the vendor, you have the rating of the vendor, you can do referrals, reviews of your purchases, etc. Now, Silk Road was raided in 2013, and this was the CBS headline for that event. A secret website called Silk Road that played host to a massive black market drug ring is now offline. 32 million were seized, the admin was arrested, and a bunch of agencies contributed to the seizure. So, was this the end? Of course, this is a rhetorical question. We know it is not. It is not. But on October 23, so a few days later, the IRS special agent in charge said this seizure sends a clear notice to those who think they can commit crimes in digital anonymity. I mean, the resolve of the government is strong. However, things didn't go too well from this perspective because the ecosystem of dark markets have kept growing. 2020 was a record year. Everything we know so far suggests that 2021 will even beat it. And so something clearly has proliferated. And this is actually the initial chronology. So Silk Road was closed, another one was OpenShip, Marketplace, and then a bunch followed in the following days. And exactly, the pandemic hasn't stopped it, on the contrary, and this is a different project we have, but I will not tell you about this now. If you're interested in questions, I can give you all the details. And you see that the seizures nowadays include many more agencies than the first one, so things have become more complicated. So the research question, if you want, is this: they are unreliable. Dark markets are heavily unreliable. They can disappear at any moment due to seizures, but also scams historically. And there is, of course, no customer protection. You cannot complain about something you buy on the dark market. Who would you complain with if it's something not legal, but in general? However, the ecosystem has proliferated. Why is this the case? Of course, the fact that they sell illicit items is one part of the story, but we believe it's not all of it. So the spoiler alert is that what I will show you is that the resilience of the ecosystem is a systemic property. So the single market is very fragile, but together they are extremely resilient. And you can have this ecosystem view. And the reason why single market closure have little impact is because users migrate in a coordinated fashion. So at any point in time, you basically have one dominated market. When this gets shut down, users migrate to another market. And the interesting thing is that they tend to migrate to the same other market. So they recreate the experience of a rich and abundant market very quickly. This is the finding. It's not a starting point, but in online talks, I find it beneficial to spoil the surprise. So what we looked at is Bitcoin transactions. There were previous studies to analyze user surveys or listings, but we have a systematic dataset of transactions we could access. So for those of you who are not familiar with Bitcoin transactions, I try to keep this talk as accessible as I could to many people. Bitcoin transactions are public by definition in the blockchain. The thing is, to make sense of them, to make the analysis meaningful, you need pre-processing. So what you observe otherwise is this: an address transfers some amount to another address. Problem is, it's very easy, and nowadays very much implemented by many systems, the creation of multiple addresses. Okay, so thanks to a collaboration with Chainalysis, we have a data set which is roughly structured in this way, following mostly the algorithms presented in the papers listed at the bottom of the page. So we don't enter in this pre-processing phase, but the concept is this. So there are two things to be made. The first one is clustering, that is determining based on certain heuristics which addresses are likely to belong to the same entity outside of the system, and labeling. So whenever possible, or in our case, just for the case of the dark markets, being able to say, okay, this cluster is actually Silk Road market, for example. Okay, please interrupt me at any time. Well, both if you have questions, but also if something is not clear, I'm very happy to try and make it clear. And so in the end, the dataset is structured in this way, where source is an entity now, and the destination is sometimes labeled, and it's stamped, etc. So now we have this dataset of transactions. So in the first paper, we looked at 356 million transactions happening in 69 markets, out of which we only consider 23, the largest ones, but also the ones about which we had a clearer information from different sources of when they shut down, because we're very interested at the moment in which the markets were shut down. In total, this is 4.2 billion in transactions, which is quite large in the literature, probably the largest at the time. And the question is, what happens after a closure? Be the closure due to scam, to surrendering of the organizers or to a police seizure. So you see, this is the chart, very simple chart, where you have time and you have the number of markets around. And each dashed line, vertical dashed line, corresponds to the closure of one market. As you can see, well, I mean, it doesn't seem to have a huge impact. Right after the closure of a market, you have a dip, because it's the closure of that market in most cases. But overall, you really wouldn't be able to assess where closures took place. And you see also from the point of view of volume, you tend to have dips following the closure, but again, the trend is more or less stable. Actually, it's stable and growing. Notice the logarithmic scale. So the weak increase on the left, the weak increase we observe in the curve is actually a significant increase. And you have two curves here just to show you that the market we selected are actually basically making all the volume. And why is this stable notwithstanding the closures? Because volume goes to other markets. So here we have two panels. This is essentially the same curve. Thing is, on the left, you have a logarithmic scale, and on the right, you have a linear scale. And you see, on the left, you have the depth, the fall of the volume due to the closed market. So the closed market, of course, reduces its volume by a factor of thousands because essentially goes to zero. Time zero is the time of the closure. So you have negative times on the left panels and positive times on the right panels. And you see on the right, you have that while the closed market keeps going down, the coexisting markets gain value, gains volume, in terms of recovering the volume of the closed market. How is this happening? This is happening due to user behavior. So this is a migration process. We have a structure of this kind. Imagine Silk Road and Ship Marketplace. You have Silk Road market users. At a certain point, Silk Road is closed, and you will have the two of them start now trading with Ship Marketplace. These two who were not dealing with ship marketplaces before and start only after are labeled by us as migrants. The non-migrants are the ones who will simply disappear from the dataset or will not migrate to the ship marketplace. And then you have this node, which was not a migrant because was already using both ship marketplace and Silk Road. And you see, this is a chart which basically summarizes the result I spoiled before. You have to read it as a clock, so clockwise starting from the top where you have Silk Road marketplace. And you see, here you have the flux from each market to other markets when that market is shut down. So from Silk Road, you see most of the users go to Ship Marketplace. I'm speaking at noon, top of the circle. And then from Ship Marketplaces, they will go to Silk Road 2. From Silk Road 2, they actually go either to Evolution or to Agora, and so on and so forth. And you see, this really goes on in a quite regular fashion. So once again, the single node is fragile. They keep shutting down or be shut down. However, the people rearrange in this way, probably coordinating outside of the network. We don't know this. But we can assume easily that there are platforms where they can coordinate the migration, or maybe not, and I will go into this soon. The important point is that 85% of expected returning users are active within 5 days from closure. So in 5 days, 85% of the folks you would expect to see acting again have already acted. Disruption is really minimal at a systemic level. These migrants are more active. They are on average 10 times more active than the non-migrants. Okay. And you see, this is systematic over all markets with the exception of one, which was huge. And they are more active both in terms of transactions they do with markets than in terms of overall transactions. So not only is it 85% of the individuals, but it's also the most active, sorry. And therefore, you really see that the preservation. Now, the preservation is there of value of the ecosystem. Now, the question is, where do they move to? And so how do they coordinate? We cannot really say, because of course you should monitor any possible platform of communication, but we can see whether we can have a guess, an educated guess on where they will migrate. So this is the real set of alternatives that users had when Alpha Bay market shut down. You see, they had Hansa, Dream, Wall Street, etc., Russian anonymous marketplaces, etc. 71% of them went to Hansa. So a large majority, given much more than random, hugely more than random. And this is the same plot we have seen before, but this time you have that on the right panel, I'm disentangling the top destination from the second destination. Once again, I can average all markets together because I'm rescaling time so that closure happens at time 0. And you see that the top destination gets an overwhelmingly larger share of users than the second top. The average share of users migrating to top destination is 66%, and users migrating to more than one market is only 4%. So here we have a sort of collective decision, and you can make two guesses. One is that they go to the second largest market in terms of volume. The other one, or second, or to the largest market in terms of volume. Typically, seizures, especially by the police, tend to concentrate on larger markets for obvious reasons. And the other possibility is that they go to the market which already had more common users with the one shutdown. It seems to be a good ordering, the one of user trading volume rank. However, there is one exception. That is, the Russian anonymous marketplaces are systematically high volume, but not the preferred destination. It's never the preferred destination. And the reason is it's in Russian. So these are bars where you have in blue the actual choice given by the data, and in orange the random choice based on what would you have expected. And you see that common user rank seems to outperform trade volume rank. However, if you exclude Russian markets, you see that actually the trade volume is the best predictor. So they tend to migrate on the largest market, which is also something, I mean, everything is obvious once you know the answer, but in any case, it's something you could consider if you want to shut down markets, even though the whole study suggests that if you want to shut down markets, you should concentrate on vendors more than markets themselves. So resilience is a systemic property. Users migrate. Influential users are more mobile, rich users. And it's possible to predict to an extent where influential users will migrate. This is a paper we published in 2020. And we have just put on the archive a very interesting, I judge, follow-up of this paper, which is this, which presents this result. That furthermore, on top of what I've been telling you so far, we find that large decentralized trade networks around dark web marketplaces. So around the single marketplace, we find that there is a whole network of trade. And what we find is that dark web marketplaces help create these networks. So these dark web marketplaces not only act as a marketplace, as you would expect, but also as a piazza, so as to say, where users can meet and then trade with one another. And these networks survive the market. So when the market is shut down or disappears, the networks tend to survive. This is it's not out today. This is a slide I did last week, but it's on the archive, very fresh. So what I'm telling you is this. This is the typical view that many have in mind when assuming a dark web marketplaces. What we find is that there are a lot of links between users that either pre-exist or, more significantly, are created during the time in which users trade with dark web marketplaces. When I say users, I'm very neutral here with vendors and buyers. Of course, you can then assume that some of them will be vendors and some of them will be buyers. We are establishing who are who, and I can tell you more about the questions if you want. So result number one, there is this informal network around it. Result number two, when the market disappears, this network is stable. Okay, so this is an important result, I think, because radically changes the perception, at least we had, about dark web marketplaces, even though we were studying them. And okay, our perception is probably not very important, but we can assume that it's a shared perspective also by several conversations with professionals. So to be a little bit more quantitative on this, there were two studies that inspired our research. They were based on interviews of 17 and 13 users that suggested that this informal network existed. We analyzed 16 million users performing 31 million transactions in 40 dark web markets over 10 years. And with that, 50% of the users, so you see, it's not like a curiosity, trade also in this user-to-user network. That they form stable relationships. So it's not sporadic. You can measure stability in many different ways. We use a sort of temporal backbone, but you can also say a threshold of at least 5 transactions, for example, etc. And in terms of volume, user-to-user networks are bigger than the corresponding network with money exchanged with the dark web marketplace. And this is true in all cases we observe. Users tend to meet, I mean, significantly meet also while active on the same dark web marketplaces. So this is a very restrictive measure we adopted as a proxy of whether the dark web marketplace acts as a piazza. So imagine a situation like this. In time t1, one user interacts with the dark web marketplace. At time t2, the other user does the same. At time 3, the two users start trading with one another. Only in this case, we say that the market acted as a piazza. Of course, we cannot prove it. It's a good proxy. And you see that the users that meet inside the dark web marketplace is proportional to the volume of the marketplace itself. So large marketplace, they tend to promote the formation more. It's quite reasonable because they have more users. Okay. And then stable pairs, not all pairs, so this is also interesting, but stable pairs, pairs which were already stable before the closure of the marketplace, which is once again scaled at time equals 0. They are stable, and when the market shuts down, you see that basically they are unaffected. I mean, eventually you have a small decrease, but yeah, I mean, it's also, we are speaking of 1 year time in which many things happen. Situation is different from non-stable users. So resilience is again a systemic property. This confirms the previous message. You have the existence of this decentralized trend network that from something hypothesized or let's say grasped through qualitative interviews is now a quantitative evidence, and the fact that they form around our marketplaces was not obvious at all. These informal networks are important both in terms of user number and trading volume. And of course, they add further resilience to the ecosystem because not only users migrate to another market, but they also have this further channels which are much more difficult to track. If you want, from a complex system perspective, what we see is a sort of pulsation. So you need marketplaces, especially at the beginning, you needed them probably, but you still need them in order to centralize somehow the attention of people who want to trade. Once you are there, however, you can use the markets as meeting platforms, if you want, as dating platforms, where peer-to-peer relationship can form. Sorry. And so this is the end of the first part. And now, along the same spirit of the importance of communities in shaping the system, I'm telling you a different story, which is the story of network of developers and correlated returns of cryptocurrencies, but in particular, a network of developers. So I chose this path because I understand you're a very heterogeneous, not heterogeneous, I mean, very interdisciplinary group. And so I found it interesting to try and launch at you more stimulations from the point of view of our work. This time, the spoiler is this. So if you were asleep before, during the previous part of the talk, you have still a chance to come back in the game by paying attention just to this slide, really, and then you can fall asleep again. We show that transparency this time is a systemic property. Crypto coders are not independent, contrarily to what we assume once again. And the open code approach to transparency neglects the network of coders. So let me give you a little bit of framework from what I mean. This is the code is law paradigm that works in this way. So code is law, of course, is a famous approach. We work in a more and more code-based realities. Cryptocurrencies in particular are interesting because they are defined and governed by the code. Their security, functionality, availability, transferability, malleability, everything you can imagine is into code. Now there is a problem when you are operating in such a system. The power of developers can become too big, and so you would have lack of transparency. The solution traditionally has been, okay, let's do this code open so everyone can check what's in the code. Okay, fair. Well, still a bit simplistic. You need to imagine that actually people do go and read the code. Of course, you have a minority of people who can do this. For large projects, this is extremely almost impossible. But in any case, the code is open. If there is an issue, everyone has access to it. Even a posteriori, you can check whether there was something not going well. Now, what we analyze to check this paradigm in the crypto space were 298 cryptocurrencies whose code is stored on GitHub and who had a decent daily trading volume of at least 100K. Okay, this dataset includes 63 of the top 100 cryptos at the time being 1 year ago, more or less. And we observed the activity of 6,000 and a bit developers for a number of 88,000 edits. We considered push except pull events. Okay, this is the distribution. Of course, Ethereum and Bitcoin are not surprisingly big, but you have 298 cryptos. What we find is that 4% of developers contribute to more than one crypto project. And again, they make 10% of all edits. So a decent number of developers, active developers, because they make more edits than their number, contribute to more than one cryptocurrency. So this immediately contradicts the idea that crypto codes are isolated silos. This isolation is a sort of an implicit assumption for the open code solution. So you need now not only to check what's in the code of a crypto, but also why it is in the code, or at least this is a legit question, okay? So we built a network of co-coded cryptocurrencies by linking two cryptocurrencies every time they share a developer. Okay, so you have initially a bipartite networks where you have developers who coded a crypto, and then you project the bipartite network into a network of crypto where you have a link every time two cryptos have been coded by the same developer. This results in a network which is not huge, of course, with 127 nodes and 204 links, which were initially activated by 147 developers. Bitcoin and Ether are, of course, the large guys. The network properties, I mean, the network is small, but it's interesting to see that the distribution of degree is somehow heterogeneous, and the number of new couplings went up in time. So it densified. Growth and densification is not necessarily the same thing. This is the distribution of connection for developers by the name. So the majority of developers only worked on 2 projects, but you see you have some individuals who worked on 5 projects and Everton Melo who worked on 18. And you can tell me, okay, but this is, yeah, you have made some reference to transparency and what it means, but can you actually measure this as an effect or it matters? Well, cryptocurrencies offer you, from this point of view, a unique feature, which is they have a market. So they have, so if you want, if the code is the genotype of a cryptocurrency, the market is the phenotype. How do they behave in the world? At least on one aspect of their behavior is measurable. So we check the market and check the temporal evolution of the market and the temporal evolution of the network I have been discussing. So what we do is this. Imagine there is a GitHub developer who has been working on Crypto 1 for a long time. At a certain point, she edits cryptocurrency number 2. This time, in the first time in which she edits cryptocurrency number 2 is what we call connection time. Then we check the price return for the 2 cryptocurrencies. The price return is simply the price at times t minus the price at time t minus 1. Okay, normalized return on investment. Price return. And then we check the correlation between the 2 time series before and after the collaboration. And the hypothesis is something could happen when the code of 2 cryptocurrencies becomes connected by a social trace, by a human working on the 2 cryptos. And what we find is that this is actually the case. So this is, on the x-axis, time is rescaled with the connection time. On the y-axis, you have the correlation between the time series of the 2 cryptocurrencies. And then you have the red curve is the linked pairs, average with interval bars. And then you have the randomized pairs. And you see that linked pairs tend to correlate their price in the months after following a code connection. The correlation increases for 65% of the linked pairs. So it's not just one outlier that determines the behavior I've shown you before. It's 65% of them for which this is true. Results also hold if you take Bitcoin or Ethereum or Ether outside of the picture. So the network is heavily dominated by, of course, the large cryptocurrencies, but they are not the driver of this phenomenon. And interestingly, why this is a correlation that we observe for price return, we don't observe it in daily changes of trading volume or market cap. Furthermore, a little bit of spectroscopy of linked pairs. You have a large difference in market cap and volume between pairs of cryptocurrencies. The second edited crypto is younger. So typically, the movement of a developer is from an old established crypto to a smaller one. And the second edited crypto is also smaller. So it's younger and smaller. The two things often correlate. Why? Okay, so we have this clear signal, somehow unexpected, that links what happens in the coding space to what happens in the market space. What's the reason of this? Well, of course, we do not know. You can have at least two hypotheses, and if you have suggestions, I'm very happy, but of course we couldn't measure them, so this is purely speculative. The first one is that code is a fundamental in the traditional economic sense. The activity of developers is a signal perceived by many traders and resulting in market synchronization. So everyone is constantly checking the code of a crypto. The signal we have analyzed is public, so the market is aware of it, and the result is this synchronization. The other one is probably more credible, although again to be proved, is interlocking directories. So you could say developers trade large amount of crypto or are hired by stakeholders who do the trade. And therefore, they are not only, so their attention in starting editing a smaller crypto correlates with a movement of capital towards it, for example, or shared interests, because the correlation can also be negative, the result of a negative, a fall of the price, of course. So if this is true, you would have a systemic risk from hidden correlation. So if you want to do, for example, portfolio diversification, if this view is true, you should take that into account. So the reasons are speculative. The implications are clearer, however. So the first one is a kind of question, is lack of incentives for developers is a long-standing problem, okay? So we do know that there are no incentives in many cases. So the question is, does trading play the role of incentive for developers to perform certain cross-currency actions? So is trading what the motivation for developers? And this is basically summing up the previous slide. The second one is what we have seen is a correlation in the marketplace that comes from the network, not from the single code. So transparency is a systemic property. If you care about the transparency of the ecosystem, open code is not enough, because open code gives you access to a semantic of what's in a crypto, but once again, doesn't give you access to these cross crypto correlations, which, however, may be important. So the take-home message is that transparency is a systemic property, as I've just said. Developers connect cryptos. The first connection between codes increases price correlation, or correlates with an increase, but that would be a very lucky event in this case. This is a general result for any code-based ecosystem which check and care about the network of developers. And in the future, we would like to do also a semantics of edits, which we haven't done so far. So this is all, really. And these are the references for the paper I mentioned today. And I'm here for questions if you have any. I can stop sharing maybe the screen or not. I don't know.
Yeah,